Let's finish up the first section. First off, I like to make a slight adjustment to the right shoulder. So if we select the right scapula control, and we'll go to frame 11 and scrub from frame 11 and 12, notice we get this weird pop due to an adjustment we made in a previous lesson. So what we want to do is just delete this key on frame 11, so we still have our value that we want for frame 12 of the scapula, so the right hand can be planted. And that takes care of that for now, and then we'll go back and adjust the scapulas a little bit later. But what we want to worry about now is actually having the arms act as shock absorbers. So what's going to happen is the character, once he lands and moves downward, he's going to move up immediately after. Okay, it's going to be almost like a snap. And to make that fix, what we'll do is select the center of gravity control, and we'll go to our perspective and graph view. And once there, let's focus in on our translate Y, F curve, and hit F, excuse me. And just FYI, if we want to see a better detailed version of our F curve, if we want to focus on a certain region, again in more detail, what we can do is hold Alt, Shift, and right mouse button, click and drag either up and down, and watch what that does. It actually scales the F curve. Okay, it squashes and stretches it. And the same thing applies for if we hold Alt, Shift, and right mouse button, click and drag left and right. So that might definitely come in handy for you. Well, let's go ahead and work on the adjustment. So what's going to happen is once a character lands, we want him coming up immediately after. So we want to hit play to get a feel of where to apply the pose and how much to apply it. And let's go to frame 22. And on frame 22, we'll go ahead and translate the center of gravity up like that. So now if we go back to frame 1 and hit play from the start of the animation, watch what we get. Bam, now the arms are acting as they should, just like shock absorbers. Okay, so that's fixed. But now notice when we scrub past, the character is slowly lowering. When that shouldn't happen, we actually want our moving hold that we placed on frame 43. So in order to adjust that, one thing we do need to adjust is to translate Y. So we'll go back to our perspective and graph view, and once there, we'll select this key on frame 43. And what we want to do is just make sure that this key is almost lined up with the key that we've just set on frame 22. So we'll hold Shift and middle mouse button, click and drag upward. Now we don't want it perfectly aligned. Okay, we don't want it exactly aligned. We want still some movement in our curve, because we don't want any dead frames in our animation. Otherwise that leads to a dead or boring animation. So if we hit play, here's what we get now. And we can see that the translate Y is now adjusted. But we also need to adjust the rotate X, because if we notice, the character is slowly rotating back in the X. So let's fix that. It's going to be a similar adjustment. We'll just go to the rotate X, hit F. And also we'll select this key on frame 43, hold Shift and middle mouse button, click and drag upward. Now if we go back and check out our moving hold, here's what we get. Alright, great. So now it's adjusted and we've maintained it. What we can do is work on the shoulders now, based off of the adjustments we've just made, because they aren't moving correctly. If we see that, we can see that they're sliding forward when they actually should be in their moving hold at about this time, and also when the character moves down, they'll be sliding back. So let's make that adjustment. We can start with this left scapula, and we'll go to where the character is all the way down, the peak of his down position on frame 17. And on that frame, let's rotate the scapulas back slightly, like that. So here's what we get when we scrub through. As the character moves down, the scapulas are moving back based off of his arms planted on the bar, so that's correct. Now we'll move on to the next part where the character is moving upward. So we'll go to the frame that we've made the shock absorber effect on frame 22. And on that frame, since the character is moving upward now, the scapulas are going to move out some. So we'll make that adjustment. So on frame 22, let's go ahead and rotate the scapula slightly outward. Not much at all. So here's what we get now when we scrub through. The scapulas are moving in on frame 17 and out on frame 22, just like we want them to. But now notice when we scrub past, we're not getting that moving hold that we need to get out of the scapulas. So we need to make that adjustment right now. And what we could do is go to frame 22. We'll be using our middle mouse button technique for the moving hold. So let's go to frame 22 and we'll shift select both scapulas. And now what we want to do is middle mouse button click on frame 43 and press Shift E. Now notice when we scrub through, the scapulas are holding like we want them to, kind of. What we need to do now is have some slight movement in our moving hold, because the character is still moving through it, so the scapulas are going to have some slight movement too. So what we want to do is focus on the direction in which the character is going during this moving hold. And he's moving slightly downward, so what we can do is just go to frame 43, take the scapulas and slightly rotate them inward based off of the character's movement, just slightly. So now we still get some subtle movement out of our scapulas, and our moving hold's looking nice. Great, so now we can start working on the next section of the animation, because we have just completed our first section. So now with the second section, we need to work on this pull here, where the character is trying to lift up the bar. And for one, it definitely needs a moving hold, just like what we did in this first section. Because notice how the character, once he pulls up, he's going down immediately. If we hit play, here's what we get. And there's no tension in that, so that needs to be fixed. And in order to fix it, what we'll do is go ahead and marquee select pretty much all of our our upper body controls. Make sure we deselect the barbell, definitely don't want that, and we don't want our hip sway. We'll again be adjusting that a little bit later. The arms are fine. What we do want are the scapula controls, so we want to make sure those are selected. And once they are, again we'll use our middle mouse button technique. So we'll go to frame 50, and from there we'll have a moving hold on about frame 79. So once the moving hold's finished, the character will go back to his second attempt pretty quickly. And remember, we want to keep the animation upbeat. So we'll go to frame 50 and middle mouse button click now on frame 79 and press Shift W and Shift E to key our translate and rotate channels. And now notice what happens when we scrub back and hit play. Bam, now we're getting a better feeling of tension in our animation. But we still need to have some slight movement on frame 79 for the moving hold. We don't want any dead frames, so our animation doesn't look awkward and boring. So in order to fix that, what we'll first do before we even get to that is add some anticipation to the character's pull. Because right now, if we just hit play, yeah, he's pulling up, tugging on the bar, trying to lift it up. But what we can do is make him really try to forcefully lift up on that weight by just adding a simple pose. So let's work on that. Let's go to frame 39, and we'll also go to our perspective and graph view and focus on the translate Y. Okay, because that's where we're going to be making our fix on. And what we want to do is isolate the movement of our anticipation. So we'll just go to the translate Y, make sure we're on 39, and put a key there. Now let's use this key that we already have on frame 43. Rather than adding more keys, we'll just take this key on 43 and adjust it. So let's make sure in one of our manipulators, either translate or rotate, so we can move our keys in the graph editor. And let's go ahead and translate this down for the anticipation. So the character is going to move down and then move back up for the pull. Let's see how that looks. Let's go ahead and hit play. We'll also focus in on the perspective and hit play. Okay, yeah, so it's looking pretty good. The character's going down and rising back up for the anticipation. Yeah, that's all right, but we can really exaggerate this pose a little bit more. And that's going to really add to the vigor of this animation. Really make him look like he's trying to yank the bar out of the weights. So we'll go back to our perspective and graph view, and what we'll do is take this key and just move it down some more. So we'll make sure we're in one of our manipulators still, and we'll hold shift and middle mouse button click and drag down a little bit more, like so about here. Now watch what we get when we hit play. So we'll scrub back a little bit and hit play. Bam! Now the character is really showing that he's trying to lift this weight forcefully. So that's fixed. And we can now work on adding a little bit more movement to our moving hold, the end of our moving hold on frame 79. And what we'll do is have the character move slightly back to show more of his pull. So on frame 79, let's translate him back down some, and back in the X. Again, to show that he's really pulling, and we want to make sure that the arms are locked. So here's what we get when we now hit play. Bam! So now we've got the character really trying to lift up the weight, and we can see that he's really struggling now. We're really getting a better feeling of tension and struggle between him and the weight, as we have him moving back now, attempting to lift it up. Great. Now is a good time to do a play blast of our adjustments to see what we need to work on next. So again, we'll find a nice view to play blast from. I think about here will be fine, and start a render off. Here it is. Excellent. So we've got the arms acting as shock absorbers, as they should, and we're starting to see the major tension that's occurring between the character and the weight as he struggles to lift it up. But we can add a few more adjustments, and one adjustment we can add is with the head. We need to add some follow through in there. So let's go ahead and close out our play blast, bring back our control curves, and let's select the head control now. And what we want to do first off is have some follow through in this section here where the character is moving upward for the pull, and then some follow through afterwards. So we'll work on that. Let's add our pose on frame 47, and we'll also go into our perspective and graph view and focus on the rotate X here. And we can use our Alt, Shift, and right mouse button click and drag trick. We'll go ahead and drag to the right just so we can see this area of the F curve in more detail. And on frame 47, since the character is moving upward, we're going to want to rotate the head downward. So let's do that. And we need to remember, keep in mind the intensity at which he's moving up. He's moving up pretty quickly, so we're going to rotate the head down some like that. And we'll also translate it forward so that the neck is staying with the head. And then we'll check out our curve on frame 47, our translate Z curve. Okay, and it looks fine. So now let's go back to the rotate X and focus a little bit more on it. So again, we'll make our view better. And here's the movement we get now. If we scrub through, this is what we're getting. And if we hit play, bam, so now we're seeing a nice snap from the head. But we need some follow through afterwards. And again, rather than adding more keys on our timeline, we could just use our existing keys if we can. So we could definitely use this key on frame 50. So with the head control still selected, we'll just select this key on frame 50, and let's move it back some for the follow through. About 3 frames, so to frame 53. Now watch what happens if we focus in on the perspective view and even hide our NURBS curve so we could just focus on our character without any distractions and hit play. Bam, notice we're getting some nice follow through now after that head snap. Excellent. So we'll bring back our control curves and select our head control again. And what we want to do now is have some follow through afterwards. So once the head goes back and moves upward slightly, now we want it to move down. So let's add that pose on about frame 65. And on 65, we'll just slightly rotate the head downward. Like that, and then slightly translate it forward, just a little bit. So here's what we get now when we hit play. Great, we're getting some nice follow through, and we could even hide the NURBS curve so we can view that more clearly. We'll hit play. Excellent. Alright, so we're just about done with this lesson. Let's make one more tweak with the head. And what we want to have happen is make the character show even more strain that he's showing now, because he's really struggling to lift the weight. And we can do that by animating the head going backwards rather than staying at this position on frame 79. So we'll have him rotate his head back on frame 79 again to show the major tension that's occurring between the character and the weight. So we'll go to the rotate X of the channel box to make sure we're only moving in it, and rotate the head back far, about like that, to really exaggerate the pose. And we'll also translate it back to make sure that the head's not detaching from the neck. About right there. So let's see how that looks. We'll start back the animation and hit play. Bam! So now the character is really starting to show some more tension, as we want to happen. Now's another great time to do a play blast, so we'll hide our NURBS curves, find a nice view, and start one off. Here it is. Great. So just a conclusion to this lesson, we've got the arms acting as shock absorbers, and we're really starting to see strain in the character to lift that weight up. So that finishes up this lesson. In the next lesson, we're going to continue working on the first pull.